My name is Boyan and I'm a 3D artist here at Chaos. Today I'm going to demonstrate how you can use different lighting tools to improve your exterior scene. We'll go over the main ways we can create natural lighting using the V-Ray sun and sky. We'll explore lighting scenarios and techniques that can improve our workflow. After that, I will show you how we can improve our lighting by mixing HDRIs and the V-Ray sun. Finally, we will create a night scene by adding some artificial lights and finishing our render with the help of V-Ray LightMix. Before we start exploring our scene, we need to set our render settings. At the beginning of each project, we have to choose the render engine we're going to use, V-Ray GPU or CPU, depending on our hardware. An important part of getting a faster result is the denoiser. For production renders, we will use the V-Ray denoiser, as it provides greater quality denoising. Because we will test many different lighting scenarios, we can choose NVIDIA's AI or Intel Open Image Denoiser. They will give us much faster initial feedback, so iterating is easier. We will also add V-Ray LightMix, which will help us with its powerful post-processing capabilities. In the parameters menu, we can choose to group our lights in different ways. For this project, we'll use the instance lights. With V-Ray LightMix, we can easily change light parameters without the need of re-rendering our image. After we have set our render settings, let's open the V-Ray frame buffer and start the interactive rendering. As you can see, our scene is rather dark right now. That's because we have no light sources. The first way we are going to light up our scene is with the V-Ray sun and sky. Let's create a daytime scenario. The V-Ray sun behaves just like a real sun. It changes its intensity and light color based on its position in the world space. If the position of the sun is at midday, it will have maximum intensity and cast a bright yellow color. Before we start exploring different lighting scenarios, let's use the material override option for some of our objects. This option will allow us to focus on the lighting without being distracted by the materials in our scene. In the override material setting, we can preserve different types of maps. This gives us more control over the amount of detail we keep on our materials. We want to preserve some of the detail in our vegetation, so let's keep the opacity. When we're working with highly reflective objects, it's always a good idea to exclude them, as they change the most based on our environment and lighting. Finally, let's add a standard V-Ray material to the material override slot. This is the material that will be overridden on all of our objects. Now let's explore the V-Ray sun and sky parameters. The first parameter we're going to look at is the sun intensity. This option multiplies the amount of light the sun is casting. It can be very useful if we're not getting enough sunlight in our scene, but we want to keep the position of the sun. Sometimes, when we increase the intensity multiplier, our image can get overexposed. In that case, V-Ray has an automated solution called auto exposure. The auto exposure parameter automatically calculates the correct exposure for your scene. This automated solution will save you time, and it's an easy way to speed up your workflow. Now, when we change the intensity of the sun, the exposure stays the same. Shadows are an important part of any composition and can help draw attention to certain areas. Right now, the shadows in our scene are very sharp and stick out. If we want to soften them, we can use the size multiplier. Another way we can use the size multiplier to aesthetically improve our scene is if we want the sun to be part of our shot. To see that, let's change the cameras so we have a better view of the horizon. Now, if we increase the size, the disk in our image grows as well. Next, let's add some warmth to our sun color. By changing the filter color, we get a layer on top of our original sun color. We can also change the color modes of the sun to better fit our artistic approach. Before we explore the sky parameters, let's create a sunset scenario. By lowering the sun to the horizon, we can start seeing the beautiful sunset gradient. The first thing we can change is the type of sky models. For this tutorial, we're going to use the PRG Clear Sky version, which has an enhanced sunrise and sunset gradient. To even further improve our sky, we can use the ground albedo. The ground albedo acts as a horizon line to the lowest point of the V-Ray sun and sky system. When we change the color of the ground albedo, we always need to keep the color of the sky in mind, so that when we start blending them, it will continue to look natural. The blending between the sky and the albedo color is done by the blend angle and the horizon offset parameters. By increasing the horizon offset, the horizon line goes lower relative to our ocean. This can be helpful if we don't want the horizon line to be part of our shot. Right now, our sky looks kind of dull. To improve it, we will do some changes in the LightMix properties. I like to use LightMix in the developing stage because it gives me easy access to all of the light sources. Changes in the intensity or color can be done while rendering. This gives me more control and speeds up my workflow even more. When we have very bright sources or reflections like the sun, it's always beneficial if we turn on the lens effects. This adds a nice bloom effect where the light is very intense, giving us a more realistic feeling. Another way of creating a daytime scene is by adding an HDRI to a dome light. Thanks to the Chaos Cosmos browser, adding an HDRI to our scene is easier than ever. All we need to do is search for HDRI and pick one. By dragging and dropping the HDRI in our scene, it automatically creates a dome light with it. For now, we will turn off the sun so we can see the effect of our dome lights. Thanks to the auto exposure, our scene is perfectly exposed and there is no need to adjust camera exposures or intensity multipliers in the dome light. Under the dome light option, we can see lock texture to icon. This allows us to rotate our dome and see the results while rendering. Before we continue exploring the daytime scenario, let's turn back our materials. This time, we will add the HDRI as our background and use the V-Ray sun to get an even better result. Having the sun in our scene will give us more possibilities to work with. Right now, I really like how our scene looks, but we're missing some reflections in our glass material. As we talked about earlier, highly reflective materials are those affected the most by our lighting. In this case, we have a lot of clouds and vegetation, which gives us an opportunity to show them in the reflections of our glass material. As you can see, the glass is more reflective now and gives us a sense of the environment around the house. Next, we'll create a nighttime scene using artificial lights. For the night scene, we'll turn off the auto exposure and add back the V-Ray sky to our background. The first thing we're going to do is create a night sky. This will give us the right exposure to work with the artificial lighting. Let's position the sun around the horizon and turn it off. This will allow us to keep the beautiful gradient without the light coming from the sun. Now let's change the ground albedo color to something more fitting for a night scene. In the LightMix properties, we'll change the environment so that we get a darker toned night sky. Remember that the color can act as a multiplier based on the brightness of the color. When we're creating any scene, the most important thing we have to think about is what is our main focal point. We can use objects that point or lead us to a specific part of the image, or we can use lights to signalize where the focal point is. In this situation, our hero object is going to be the house. That means that the house has to be complemented by all of the lights. The rest of the objects in our scene need to be lit to the point where they don't conflict with our hero object. Let's start with the IES lamps. This is a type of lamp which describes light distribution from a light source using real-world measured data. We're going to use them to light up the parameters of our house. I have already set up some IES lamps near the walls of the building. Now let's import different type of profiles to see the difference. For this house, I think wider profiles will look better, so we will stick with these ones. If the light isn't the right intensity, we can always change that from the LightMix properties. Because we'll use LightMix to adjust our light sources, we'll add white color for all of our lamps. Next, let's add the lights inside the house and create a cozy atmosphere. We can use plain lights when we want to accent a specific area, but if we want to light up a bigger area, the sphere light is a better choice. When we're working on a night scene, we should always make sure that everything is visible. This means that each part of our image needs to have some type of detail. To achieve that, we're going to add some additional lights to complement all the dark spots in our image. After we have added all of our lights, it's time to give them some color. We want the inside of the house to feel warm compared to the cold lights on the outside. For the colors of the inside lamps, we're going to use the Kelvin scale. will stay around the 2700 to 3000 Kelvin range. The warm tones are mostly used in living room spaces and bedrooms. These lights feel more inviting. For the outdoor lights, we have to keep in mind the balance of warm and cold lights. As we have warm lights on the inside, our outdoor lights need to be cooler tones, staying around the 3000 to 5000 Kelvin range. Finally, let's add some stars to our night sky, as it's a bit boring right now. I've already set them up. I used some cellular maps to create the stars and attach them to a Vireo light material. I've chosen to use the opacity channel as well, so we can still see our night sky. The Vireo light material is controlled by the self-illumination properties in the LightMix menu. Don't forget that the self-illumination properties also control the intensity and color of the aerial perspective. In this tutorial, we set out to create different types of exterior lighting, and thanks to Vireo 5's new functionalities, it was effortless. First, we went over the Vireo sun and sky parameters. We used Vireo LightMix to easily tweak our lights without re-rendering. Next, we create natural lighting with the help of dome lights. Finally, we created a night scene using artificial lights. We hope you found these tips and tricks useful, and you'll try them out in your visualization work. Thank you for being part of the Vireo experience.